Hello and welcome to Newscentre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Top story continues to be the war between Israel and the Hamas. At least 30 people have been killed in Gaza as Israel's air attacks pounded the region overnight since the start of the war. More than 5,000 people have lost their lives. Israel's military is claiming that 203 people, including children, peace activists, the elderly and soldiers, are being held hostage in Gaza. After his visit to Israel, US President Joe Biden said that Egypt has agreed to allow 20 trucks with humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. The aid is likely to start arriving from Friday. However, Biden warned against Hamas stealing this aid. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak arrived in Tel Aviv as a show of solidarity. He said that he stands with Israel against the evil that is terrorism. French President Emmanuel Macron is also expected to visit Israel soon. As leaders from the West continue to express their support for Israel, pro-Palestine protesters in Chicago are calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Several Jewish protesters also staged demonstrations at the US Capitol Hill. Thousands of people are also rallying in Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan and Yemen in solidarity with the Palestinians.
I'm here to express my solidarity with the Israeli people. You have suffered an unspeakable, horrific act of terrorism, and I want you to know that the United Kingdom and I stand with you.
Joining us now on Newscentre to take this forward is American-Israeli writer and also Ambassador DP Srivastava. Ambassador DP Srivastava is India's former ambassador to Iran. He has been on the boards of GAIL. Also, he has served in Saudi Arabia. We're joined by Yoni Leviatan, Israeli-American writer, and DP Srivastava, former ambassador to Iran. Ambassador Srivastava, if I may come to you, what do you think is the economic cost of this war? We're looking at a massive human death toll, a large number of people injured. But when it comes to the economy in the region and also the world, what's going to be the big blow, according to you?
The oil prices, 10 days before the events of 7th October, they were on a downward trajectory. Since then, there has been 6% increase in oil prices. This is going to affect the world economy, which is already under strain because of high interest rates and slowdown in EU and Chinese economies. In terms of its impact on India, I come from India, so that's always something which concerns us. $1 increase in the oil price leads to something like $2 billion per annum increase in India's annual oil import bill. There's already about $6 increase so far. So you can imagine its impact. Its impact will also be felt in the rich world. I believe in most American states, the prices of oil or petrol at the pump is above the $4 a gallon, which is the comfort level for American politicians. There's also going to be increase in the gas prices, and this has already climbed up by something like 30%. And there will be a proportionate increase in the LNG prices. So there's going to be massive impact on the world economy in case the conflict escalates. And mind you, right now, the conflict is in that part of the Arab or Middle East, which does not produce oil. And Israel produces gas, and I think it's called the Med Company. Israel has formed a company for extracting gas from Leviathan gas field and exporting it to Europe. That its work has already been suspended. So it's going to have negative impact all around. But in case there is an escalation and this spreads to larger economies, which are major oil-producing economies in the Middle East, the impact will be much more.
Right. Right. Yoni Leviatan, let me speak to you about what's happening on the ground in terms of Israel's offensive. Yes, one can understand the attack, the reason for going all out against the Hamas right now, but also globally, there are growing concerns for deaths of civilians, of children, of women, attacks on hospitals, of cutting off food, fuel and supplies to hospitals and other areas in Gaza. Do you feel that Israel, now that the initial reaction has happened over the last 10 days, may somehow open up humanitarian corridors and make sure that civilians, the children in these areas are not hurt?
Yes, it's not only a global concern, it is an Israeli concern. Our aim is not to hurt innocent Palestinian civilians. I believe that Egypt has agreed to open its border crossing in Rafah. And last time I checked, there was 20 trucks of humanitarian aid preparing to go in if they haven't gone in already. And let's not forget, we're still, you talked about the economic costs. We're still trying to figure out what the human cost of this is. We don't have a final tally of our death toll, because the bodies were so badly mutilated, so badly burned, that we've had to require families to give DNA in order to match evidence and identify who these people are. That's why the numbers keep going up. We also don't know exactly how many hostages we have. I believe the number now is around 203, but that number keeps going up too. So in terms of the country, we're trying to figure out a lot of costs, the human costs, and there is an economic cost. We have a citizen army. One of our biggest, half of our exports comes from the high-tech industry. A lot of these people are now in uniform. Our economy is on something of a pause because everybody's out there on the front lines, either fighting Hamas or protecting the northern border. And if they're not doing that, then they're working at home to provide food for the soldiers, to fill in roles where people are needed. This is a country that it's still October 7th in Israel, and the world needs to understand that. And of course, we're doing everything possible to minimize civilian casualties in Hamas, in Gaza, but it's important to understand that all of these casualties are the responsibility of Hamas. They launched a war against us that isn't a war for territory, right? Because in a war for territory, you expect the victor to come in and occupy your land,
Yoni,
and take over and so forth.
I would also like to ask you, while Secretary Blinken visited Israel, also Joe Biden visited and met Netanyahu, there is a concern in the US, and that is the conflict should not escalate beyond Israel and Hamas, Israel and Gaza. It should not become a Middle Eastern or an Arab world crisis, because there's a lot at stake right now. Do you think while Israel keeps up this military offensive, they would like to make sure that the conflict remains in this region and does not escalate? I'm asking because there has been a lot of anger in the Arab world and in the Middle East over the attack on the Gaza hospital.
Yes, and I think that anger is justified. I think the problem is that the media rushed to judgment and put out headlines that inflame the entire world, especially the Arab world. And we know now from all the evidence that this hospital strike was not done by Israel. It was done by a failed rocket launch from Islamic Jihad. And had the media done, at least given the same scrutiny to Hamas that they've given to Israel and the IDF, we had to spend a week putting out pictures of dead families, burnt families, children shot, blood on the walls in order to prove the atrocities that happened. And yet for some reason, Hamas puts out a number 500 dead, says Israel did it, and within minutes, the world media runs with it. So I would ask the world media to not hold the IDF, hold Israel to the highest standard possible, because we are a democratic country. But please, at least hold Hamas to the same standard, because Hamas is responsible for the rocket launch that failed and hit that hospital, and the media that ran the headlines, the New York Times, the BBC, they are responsible for lighting the Arab street on fire. Because had those headlines not run, then when President Biden was here, he would have met, then right after Israel, he would have gone to Jordan. He would have met with King Abdullah. He would have met with al-Sisi from Egypt. He would have met with Mahmoud Abbas, and maybe there would have been a positive outcome from that. But due to the irresponsibility
I'll get an Ambassador DP Srivastava. Ambassador DP. Got it. Ambassador DP Srivastava, getting you back into the discussion. What's the risk of this escalating? And I would ask, because the summit with Arab leaders and President Biden was cancelled. We saw Iranian officials, high-ranking ministers visiting Saudi Arabia. How are you seeing the changing alignments in the Middle East, in the Islamic world, as a result of what's happened over the last 10 days?
You know, the escalation depends whether or not the present campaign goes on. We have enormous sympathies with Israel. And let me say at the outset that we are horrified, and our Prime Minister has strongly condemned the actions of Hamas in launching this terrorist attack and holding hostages. But in case the humanitarian crisis continues, there is bound to be a reaction in the Arab street. Now, the escalation can come in two ways. It could be as a result of actions of governments. It could be as a result of actions of street, which is bound to have an impact on the policy pursued by governments. So we see that there is a note of caution on part of Arab countries which were moving towards closer relations with Iran, with Israel. Now, coming back to how it's going to whether how it's going to lead to any escalation, I don't want to speculate at this stage. I do hope that all sides exercise restraint and the escalation does not happen. But in case it does, I think all bets are off.
Right. One more question, Ambassador Srivastava. When it comes to India, we've been seeing the likes of Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, and very soon President Macron. President Macron will also be visiting Israel. What kind of approach should India take, considering our stakes in the region, our ties with US, Israel, our long-standing stand on the two-state solution, also our ties with the Middle East?
Well, I can give you my views, and I must clarify, I know I do not represent Government of India in any way. I have retired. But I think the first step should be the release of the hostages by Hamas, and this should be unconditional. They should not be linked to any long-term solution, but there has to be action in parallel by Israel. And Israel, I think, as if I may quote President Biden's words, President Biden cautioned that Israel should not allow itself to be consumed by rage and commit the mistake which perhaps US did after the 9/11. After 9/11, US went in, US overturned Al-Qaeda Taliban government within a matter of weeks. 2 decades later, Taliban are back in power in Afghanistan. Now, the difference in the two situations is that America could withdraw. It's 10,000 kilometers away. In case of Israel, you can't change the geography. It sits right there. So there's reason to be even more cautious. And therefore, it's important that Israel permits relief, humanitarian relief. The bombing rates have to stop, and there has to be a ceasefire. The longer the war goes on, the more it's toll in terms of opinion in many of these countries surrounding Israel, and that is going to lead to some impact on the actions of the government. Finally, there has to be a two-state solution because, looking forward, and what I'm saying is something which was agreed by all sides, including Israel. This was the part of the Oslo Agreement. Let's not go into who's responsible for the delay and so on, but we should look forward, and there has to be an implementation of two-state solution. And this should be coupled with Arab recognition.
Okay, we've run out of time, Ambassador Srivastava.
To exist in peace with all its neighbors.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Srivastava and Yoni, for joining us on the program. We've unfortunately run out of time, but this is a story that we'll continue focusing on over the next few days. We're taking a break, but up next, we get you an exclusive conversation with Arun Venkatraman, U.S. Assistant Secretary for Commerce, who says that U.S. companies are supportive of India's supply chain resilience related to laptops and tablet curbs. An exclusive conversation coming up.
So let me begin first by noting where we are in this bilateral relationship. This is a historic moment in this relationship. And